Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Edge of Malice, the Marie Grossman story, by David P. Miraldi, narrated by Aaron Shedlock. Preface. During the course of an attorney's career, there are usually a handful of cases that stand out as the most memorable, and from that select group there is usually one that sits atop of the list. For me, that one case involved Marie Grossman. I knew and admired Marie before the events described in this book ever happened. Since then, my respect for her has only grown. It was an honor when she allowed me to tell her story. This book is one of creative non-fiction. Like other works in this genre, the events described in this book are true, but the dialogues and thoughts of the characters have been recreated. In order to protect their privacy, I have also changed the names of several people involved in the story. With those few explanations out of the way, I hope that you will find as much inspiration in Marie's story as I have. Part 1. The Crime. 1. Collision Course. Disoriented and groggy, Richard Thompson rolled over on the bare mattress that elevated him a few inches above the worn carpet. His tall body rested diagonally across the mattress, one leg dangling over its edge like an oar poised above the water's surface. The room was cold despite the periodic firing of an electric heater whose orange filaments made more noise than heat. During the night, someone had thrown a red plaid blanket over him, and he hugged its rumpled mass to his chest. At first, he wasn't sure where he was. Cardboard covered the room's one broken window, and diffused light peeked from its periphery, giving Richard just enough illumination to identify the shapes of the furniture. He squeezed his eyes shut while shaking his head, hoping that this combination would jump-start his brain. He raised his head and instantly felt woozy. When the dizziness had passed, he realized that he was in Christopher's apartment, and it was morning. He and Christopher Martin had gotten high the night before, something they'd been doing regularly for the past 6 months. Although his family's home was just a few blocks away, he decided not to walk back there last night. Sure, it had been cold. December nights in Cleveland usually were, but he'd been wasted. Stoned and alone, he'd have been an easy target for one of the gangs that roamed his neighborhood. Huff could be a dangerous place at any hour of the day, but after midnight, it was no place for someone to take a stroll, gun or no gun. Last night's weed had been strong, laced with hash, if you believed Christopher, but who knew? Christopher was a bullshit artist, and not to be trusted. Yet, time and again, Richard cast his lot with him. They were both 19 and had known each other since grade school. Neither had a regular job. When they needed money, they robbed, except they never called it that. For them, it was going out and making money. Richard had branched out a little by selling weed, but he was a small-timer, the last link in a chain of suppliers and middlemen. Christopher was short, stocky, and muscular. His constant sneer warned of a latent anger that could surface quickly. Christopher was fearless and without conscience, qualities that made him an able partner. As a kid, he'd struggled in school and disrupted the classroom, leading to several suspensions and his inevitable dropping out. After that, he'd survived by his cunning on the street. Richard had come to crime by a different route. Unlike Christopher, he had been raised in a stable family. His parents, both industrious people from Louisiana, had migrated to Cleveland seeking better-paying jobs in the 1960s. His mother was a faithful Baptist who took him to church every Sunday until, as a teenager, he'd refused to go anymore. His father was also a strong presence, working a variety of jobs and coaching youth basketball teams in his free time. Despite their hard work, they were still living in huff and struggling to pay their bills. Young guys working the street had more to show for their efforts than his parents, an irony not lost on Richard. His future had initially looked bright. He had been a high school basketball star and had been offered a full athletic scholarship to Purdue. However, his basketball skills had been both a blessing and a curse. His high school teachers didn't require him to do much of anything. They'd pass him in order to maintain his athletic eligibility. Although the world had its rules, Richard soon believed that they didn't apply to him. In the end, one teacher had given him a failing mark in a civics course, and he hadn't graduated with his class. Although he'd made up the class in summer school and received his diploma, His scholarship had been yanked, with little hope of a future reinstatement. To compound things, he'd gotten his girlfriend pregnant, and he was now the father of a baby girl. Then there were the drugs. It all started by hanging out with the wrong guys. He had begun using pot and coke in high school, sometimes getting high before basketball games. After he left school, his drug use had steadily increased until it dominated his life. He wasn't exactly sure when that had happened, only that it had. He now lived to get high and would do whatever he needed to support his habit. Today would be like any other. He and Christopher would smoke the rest of their weed and then buy more. They were both broke, which meant that they would eventually have to make some money. They were good at that. 12 miles away in Lakewood, Ohio, Marie Grossman was beginning a day that promised to be busy. The 45-year-old wife and mother of two was scheduled to spend her entire workday in meetings at the Cleveland Clinic. After that, she would rush directly to Hawkins School, where her younger son would be wrestling in a high school meet. She had risen around 7 a.m., showered, and dressed in a rust-colored business suit. By 8 a.m., she was backing her blue two-door Mustang onto Lake Road for the drive to the clinic. As daylight began to push away the darkness, a morning fog reduced visibility to less than 2 blocks. She assumed that once it burned off, the weather would revert to what Clevelanders came to expect in December, gray, overcast skies with temperatures hovering around freezing. Usually, the only variable was the amount of wind and rain. Today, temperatures were predicted to rise into the upper 40s. Traffic was heavy by the time she merged onto the shoreway. Focusing on the bumper-to-bumper traffic, she sporadically listened to the morning news broadcast for this Friday, December 11th, 1987. President Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev had just concluded a 3-day summit aimed at limiting strategic weapons. She slammed on her brakes as a red Ford Fiesta cut into her lane, its driver talking animatedly with his passenger. Her right hand was poised over the horn, ready to bear down on it, but the danger had passed, and she gave the careless driver a free pass. When the news ended, she clicked off the radio to focus on her upcoming meetings at the clinic. Since July, she'd been working for Preferred Healthcare, a company that was setting up mental health networks in various cities for businesses that ran their own employee health plans. Today, she and a fellow employee, John Wellston, were meeting with psychiatrists, non-physician psychiatric staff, and administrators to determine what services the Cleveland Clinic could provide. They would quiz the clinic staff about not only the quality of its care, but also its controls in eliminating unnecessary psychiatric treatment. The sprawling Cleveland Clinic campus was located in Cleveland's run-down Huff and Fairfax neighborhoods, two of the city's highest crime areas. To keep its employees and patients safe, the clinic employed a security force that was the second largest in Cuyahoga County, bested in numbers only by Cleveland's own police department. After parking in one of the clinic's parking garages, she walked briskly to the main building and met her colleague in the central lobby. After exchanging pleasantries, she and John met with the head of the clinic's psychiatric department, their first appointment. The morning meetings spilled one into the next, leaving just enough time to grab a salad for lunch at the hospital's cafeteria. The afternoon sessions followed much the same pattern. As they finished up their last appointment, Marie glanced at her watch and saw that it was 5:30 p.m. Although Wellston's face showed exhaustion, he still wanted to talk about the day's meetings. "Do you have time for a coffee?" he asked. "No coffee for me, but I can talk for 10 minutes or so. I need to get to my son's wrestling match." Pointing to an empty waiting area near the psychiatry check-in desk, she said, "Let's just sit here for a few minutes." They found 2 chairs positioned at a 90-degree angle to one another, sat down, and began reviewing their notes. Instead of asking specific questions and giving a general overview, Wellston discussed each meeting, highlighting the major points and identifying what they still needed to do for follow-up. Marie checked her watch again. It was 6:05. "John, I really need to wrap this up," she said. "Okay, just a couple more things. I would like you to follow up with the numbers guy. I can't remember his name." "You mean Silverton? I will, and I'll call you after I do." "Great. Do you need me to walk you out to your car?" "No, that's all right. It's in the parking garage. Should still be lots of people there now." Richard Thompson and Christopher Martin drove over to Richard's house in the late morning of Friday, December 11th. By now, both of Richard's parents were at work and his 2 younger sisters were at school. He had some pot stashed there, and they smoked it in the living room while watching television on a small black and white set. By 2:30 p.m., they were back at Christopher's place, where they shared a few joints with Christopher's girlfriend until they had smoked the last of his supply. At 4:30 p.m., Christopher told his girlfriend that they needed to go out and make some money. They piled into Richard's blue Chevy. As Richard started his car, he said, "I feel like Burger King again. That okay with you?" "Yeah, my car's broken down in the Burger King lot. I gotta check on it anyway." Richard nodded and felt for the .38 caliber revolver in his left jacket pocket. Over the past 3 months, the two had committed 15 robberies at nearby fast food restaurants, following a plan that Christopher had devised. They would drive to one of the area's restaurants, park in the back lot, and remain in the car until the right opportunity presented itself. When the drive-thru line had just one customer, a lone woman, they would make their move. Because the woman would lower the car's window to place her order, it was easy for Richard or Christopher to stick a gun through it and point it at the woman's head. Whispering or gesturing, they'd tell her to unlock all of the doors and let them in. Once in, they'd direct her to drive to an ATM and withdraw her maximum cash limit. After she'd handed the money over to them, they'd force her out of the car and take off in it. Only 6 weeks earlier, the two had robbed a young woman at the drive-thru at this same Burger King. Located on Euclid Avenue, it occupied the entire frontage between East 85th Street and East 86th Street. The parking lot was not fenced, nor was there much illumination in the back. Although the building's rear had a solid door at one corner, it had no windows. The drive-thru menu board was located about 15 yards from the back of the building, almost directly even with the rear door. Employees or patrons inside the building could not view the back lot or the menu board. Except for several 3-story apartment buildings bordering the back lot, it was secluded. "You think they've added a video camera since last time?" Christopher asked. "I went by there yesterday, and there wasn't one then," Richard said. "We'll look again." They reached the restaurant around 4:45, just as the sun began to set in the heavily overcast skies. They parked in the rear, and Richard got out to look around. When he got back into the car, he told Christopher that he didn't see any surveillance cameras. He'd also peeked into the restaurant's front window to check for a security guard. No security guard, and just a few patrons inside the restaurant. Over the next hour and a half, they watched as about 50 customers used the drive-thru. They'd seen plenty of cars with men in them and about a dozen with passengers, but none with just a lone woman and no other vehicles behind her. Around 6:20, there was a lull in the drive-thru traffic. A blue Mustang turned off of Euclid Avenue and slowly made its way toward the drive-thru order board. The Mustang's sole occupant was a woman. Both men got out of the car. In order to reach Hawkins School in time for her son's match, Marie knew that she had only 30 to 45 minutes. Her son Joe wrestled at one of the lower weight classes and was usually the second or third match. She considered driving straight there, but she had not eaten much for lunch, and she was hungry. If she hustled, she could buy some fast food and get there in time. Although she had never stopped at the Burger King at Euclid and East 85th Street, she knew it was there. She had driven by it many times on her way to University Circle, a few blocks farther to the east. After passing a turreted Victorian limestone church at East 86th, she came to the Burger King restaurant. As her Mustang pulled into the front parking lot, Marie caught a glimpse of the restaurant's interior. No patrons inside as far as she could tell. She smiled, convinced her order would be filled quickly. As she drove behind the building, she spotted the menu board to her left. She was in luck again. No one ahead of her. Just a few seconds after Marie stopped, a female voice came from the menu board and asked her if she was ready to order. Marie lowered her window. "I would like an order of 6 chicken tenders," she said. As she was considering her drink choice, a man suddenly slipped between the menu board and her car. She had no idea where he'd come from. Just as quickly, he pointed a revolver through her open window, not more than 6 inches from her temple. With his left hand, he held a finger to his lips, the universal sign to remain quiet. She could see that he was a dark-skinned African-American male, very tall and thin, probably in his early 20s. He had not bothered to use a mask to cover his long face. In the dim light, she saw his short-cropped hair and a day's growth of stubble. His eyes were deeply bloodshot, and despite the 40-degree weather, she saw perspiration on his forehead. The gun made it hard for her to think. You're being robbed. Give him your purse, she reasoned. That's what experts always said to do in this situation. Just hand over your money and credit cards. Don't hesitate. Just do it. Her purse was located in the middle console near the gear shift. She slowly reached for it, picked it up, and held it by the open window. Here's my purse, she said, hoping that the employee taking her order would hear her. She placed her purse on the ledge of the car's open window and released her grip. It dropped to the pavement below, where some of its contents spilled onto the cold, black asphalt. The man made no effort to take any of it. He gestured and looked across the car, apparently making eye contact with someone else. Without taking her eyes off of the man with the gun, Marie realized that her assailant had an accomplice. The man with the gun was reaching inside her car with his free hand. What did he want? Do you want my car? Marie asked, again hoping that the Burger King employee would hear her and send help. Demonstrating that she needed to shut up, the man glared at her and held his finger to his lips again. The man used his left hand to open the driver's side door and then quickly slipped in behind her seat, pushing it forward as he attempted to force his way into the back seat. They wanted to get in, that was clear. Although she was extremely frightened, Marie's mind worked rapidly and logically. They don't want my money, and they don't want my car. My God, they want me. I'm going to be raped, she concluded. She revolted at the thought. She knew rape. The violence, the ugliness, and the shame. Once summoned, its memory was both vivid and acrid. No, she would not be raped again. Of that much she was sure. The gun was inches from her head. The man with bloodshot eyes could shoot her if she didn't follow his instructions. She closed her eyes for a brief second. Her hand squeezed the steering wheel, choking it in a death grip. She knew the risk, but the next move would be hers. Whatever happened to her tonight would happen right here, right now, in the Burger King parking lot. 2. Before. Anyone familiar with Marie Grossman's past would not have been surprised by how she ultimately chose to respond to the armed man confronting her. She had inherited a keen intelligence and resourcefulness from both her mother and father. Throughout her life, she had sought new challenges and opportunities. She was attracted by jobs that stretched her current abilities and forced her to master new skills. After a job became routine, she hungered for something new. For Marie, life was always about the next big adventure. One only had to look to Marie's parents to find the roots of her personality. She was the older of 2 daughters, born to Walter Joseph Joe Chaborda and Miriam Snyder Chaborda. Both parents came from poor but stable families, and each was the first in their family to graduate from college. They both knew how to overcome serious obstacles and carve out better lives for themselves. Marie's father was one of 8 children born to Slovakian immigrants who'd settled in Newark, New Jersey. Joe was the 4th oldest and was the 2nd oldest of 4 boys born in rapid succession, each about a year apart. As youngsters, the 4 slept crossways in one bed. Because they shared the same clothes, the earliest to rise grabbed the best clothing. During the Great Depression, Joe dropped out of school in the 8th grade and landed a job in a foundry to help with family expenses. One day, he spotted men in suits touring the plant. He asked someone, "Hey, how do I get to be like them?" One of the workers replied, "Those are college men. You got to go to college if you want a job like that." Without telling his mother, Joe returned to high school. His brothers made up the difference in his lost earnings, and Joe graduated from Irvington High School in 3 years. The brothers were all outstanding athletes and played semi-professional football as teenagers. Joe was the quarterback of a team that featured 3 of his brothers in the backfield. Joe's athletic ability caught the eye of a recruiter for Colgate University, and an athletic scholarship soon followed. When he arrived by bus in Hamilton, New York, he did not have the money to pay for the taxi drive to campus. Instead, with his suitcase in hand, he hitchhiked the remaining few miles. Somehow navigating a world of privilege of which he was not a member, Joe earned his degree while playing both baseball and football for Colgate. After graduation, he entered a management training program at the American Can Company, where he started as a foreman at its Jersey City factory. While taking a weekend break at the Jersey Shore, he met his future wife, Miriam Snyder. Widowed in her early 30s, Miriam's mother fended for herself and 3 children. She opened her 3-bedroom house to boarders, students at the nearby Western Union School. To supplement that income, she used her dining room to host bridge parties and stock the hall bookshelves with small gifts, greeting cards, and wrapping paper. Anyone who needed a birthday gift could come, pick it out, and have it gift-wrapped in a jiffy. She maintained a large vegetable garden and canned much of the harvest for year-round use. A strong woman of faith, she rarely missed church and visited the sick frequently. Miriam was a gifted pianist and excellent student, graduating from high school at 16. Her mother found the means to send her to the New Jersey State Teachers College at Trenton, where she graduated with a degree in elementary school education. Miriam's first teaching position was at a one-room schoolhouse with multiple grades. As a young teacher, she found it difficult to maintain discipline in this mixed-age environment and sought other employment after 2 years. She was working as a clerk at Haynes Department Store when she met Joe Chaborda. After they were married, they moved into a working-class neighborhood in Irvington, New Jersey, a step above the rough neighborhoods of Newark. Their first child, Marie, was born on February 15, 1942, and another daughter followed a year and a half later. The girls shared a bedroom in a 2-bedroom flat until the family moved to a slightly better neighborhood in Garwood, New Jersey. Joe was moving up the ladder at American Can, and their house in Garwood reflected that slight shift in their fortunes. Marie was raised in a stable, loving environment and thrived. Like her parents, Marie was an excellent student. Although her mother could not interest her in music, Marie enjoyed art, particularly drawing. She delighted in the summer evenings when she and a hodgepodge of neighborhood kids played Spud, a street dodgeball game that often lasted until the streetlights came on. Although not excited by the prospect, Marie joined the Girl Scouts at her mother's bidding. To her surprise, she quickly came to love camping and the outdoors. By the time she was in junior high, she relished her 2 weeks at scout camp, which culminated in a canoe trip down the Delaware River. At day's end, the girls pulled their canoes from the river, cooked their supper, and slept under the stars. Marie attended a regional high school that drew students from 6 adjoining towns, including Garwood and Berkeley Heights, where Bell Labs was located. For the first time, Marie interacted with children from higher income levels who had different post-high school aspirations. Through them, she realized that women did not have to become secretaries, teachers, or nurses. In high school, she excelled in academics and was surrounded by a small, close-knit group of friends. Friday night football games were especially fun. As a majorette, Marie entertained the crowds with her baton twirling, while her boyfriend was the team's quarterback. By the end of her junior year, her high school performance in both academics and extracurricular activities opened the possibility of attending any number of top-rated colleges and universities. Then came the summer of 1958, and a life-altering encounter that would always be a part of her. After her junior year in high school, she joined many of her high school classmates at the Jersey Shore, where older high school students came in droves during the summer months. A young female high school teacher chaperoned Marie and 9 other girls while they stayed in a cottage there. The week began with a whirlwind of social activity as different groups of friends came to their cottage and traveled in packs to the beach. Marie enjoyed the company of this group, all of whom she knew from school. However, in the middle of the week, an older teen stopped by. He lived down the street from her and was the older brother of one of her girlfriends. Although she knew little about him, she believed that she would be safe with him when he invited her to his motel room to drink some beer. Once she was inside the motel room, he grabbed her, and Marie suddenly realized that she was trapped and about to be victimized. Isolated from her friends, she had no hope of being rescued, no matter how loudly she screamed. With his superior strength, he overcame her resistance. After he released her back to her group, Marie thought her life was ruined. She felt such shame that she considered drowning herself in the ocean. The next morning, she walked to the nearest church and rang the doorbell to seek help. The minister came to the door, and Marie explained that she was deeply troubled and needed to talk. When she explained what had happened, the clergyman was decidedly unsympathetic and blamed her for putting herself in that situation. On her walk back to the cottage, Marie again considered taking her own life. She eventually told a group of her girlfriends what had happened. When her boyfriend arrived later in the day, she told him the entire story. Although he remained silent, his anger was palpable. She sensed that he and some of his football friends would corner her assailant and take revenge. Because they never spoke about this again, she never knew what action, if any, he took. When she returned home, she decided not to tell her parents or report the rape to the police. No one talked about sexual assaults. As far as she knew, rape didn't happen to people like her, and she felt deeply ashamed and responsible. She would try to bury the memory. Over the next months and years, she eventually realized that she was not to blame. Her humiliation turned into anger. She had trusted a neighbor who had betrayed her. He had sought her out, isolated her, and overpowered her. She had not invited or encouraged his behavior. The encounter had been about his own sexual gratification, viciously exercised. What he had done was a crime, plain and simple, and it was not her fault. However, she did not want the anger to consume her and fought to move on. Although she tried to keep the memory locked away, it had its own life and escaped when it could. The trigger could be anything: an older man staring at her longer than normal, a teenager who resembled her assailant, or a man walking behind her when she was alone. It was always there, under the surface, ready to pounce. And when it did, she relived the horror and the outrage. She would never forget that the world could become a very ugly place. Suddenly, and without warning. If she was ever threatened again, she would be ready. But for now, she would try to live life on her own terms. To the world, she seemed like the same Marie. She did all the things that high school seniors did. She continued to date her longtime boyfriend, the school's quarterback, a quiet and reserved young man with whom she had a close and confiding friendship. With her other friends, she stayed active and involved. In academics, she continued to study hard and excelled. She twirled her baton, not only at football games, but at nursing homes as part of a group of high schoolers who entertained the residents. In the fall, Marie began her freshman year at Duke University. When she chose Duke, she knew that she would be attending a Southern school, but she did not comprehend the cultural difference between the North and the South. When Marie saw her first whites-only drinking fountain, she suddenly realized that she was in the world of Jim Crow and strict segregation. There were no black students at Duke, and although women were admitted, they were outnumbered by their male counterparts 4-1. The strict Duke dress code forbade women from wearing slacks to class. Taking a diverse selection of courses, Marie gravitated toward art history until her ever-practical father told her that she needed to focus on a more traditional major. Prodded in the right direction, Marie became a psychology major. Although Duke had sororities, it did not have sorority houses. Many of the same women lived together in one dormitory for their entire college stay, leading to close female relationships that often lasted a lifetime. It was at Duke that Marie met her future husband, Chuck Grossman. They were both in the same year, but because Chuck was an electrical engineering student, they had no classes together. Chuck was first drawn to Marie when he spotted her photograph in a campus magazine after she had been named a campus duchess. He was captivated by her pretty face and bided his time, waiting for the opportunity to ask her out when she was between boyfriends. Toward the end of their junior year, Marie was free again, and Chuck mustered his courage to ask her for a date. She knew next to nothing about him, only that he and one of her former boyfriends were friends and wrestled for the Duke team. On a lark, Marie had decided to go out with him, and to her surprise, they clicked from the start. The relationship grew more and more serious, and they married soon after graduation. Chuck and Marie moved to San Diego, where Chuck worked for General Dynamics and took some night business courses while Marie took additional college courses in order to teach school. She did her student teaching in Southern California and became a certified elementary school teacher. Chuck found his work among 2,000 engineers unsatisfying and decided a career switch was in order. He applied to Harvard Business School and was accepted into its MBA program. For the next 2 years, Chuck and Marie lived in the Boston area, and Marie taught 3rd grade in Malden, Massachusetts. She also tutored at-risk students at the Phillips Workhouse in South Boston's Roxbury neighborhood. When Martin Luther King Jr. came to Boston to protest the city's segregated schools, Marie joined the march. After Chuck earned his degree, they moved to the Cleveland area, where Chuck worked in the family business, a company that made fire-retardant clothing, while Marie found another teaching position. Although she was offered a job in a suburban school system, Marie opted to teach third grade and
Sample complete. Ready to continue?